we should not expect all that much from U.S.-Pakistan relations. I think that the Trump administration will likely not prioritize the relationship with Pakistan. If one wants to be an optimist, you could say, well, there's no major crisis playing out with Pakistan now. There's no tensions, and maybe it's a good thing for for Pakistan not to be on President Trump's radar. I think that Trump likes to say that he defeated ISIS, right? And so he'll also want to be seen as the one that's able to curb this resurgence of ISIS, which mainly has played out through this growing threat posed by Islamic State Khorasan. So that might mean that there could be some modest scope for counterterrorism cooperation between the U.S. and Pakistan, realistically through several rounds of dialogue in this ongoing counterterrorism dialogue that you saw in the previous Biden administration as well.
Watch Federal Post. Bold and independent.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. This is Hasan Zafar with Talking Politics. I'm joined by Michael Kugelman. He heads a think tank in the United States and he's quite focused on Pakistan. He speaks on the Pakistani forum yesterday. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining. I would like to start beginning by talking about the new administration in Washington. What are your hopes with Donald Trump's administration in Washington?
Yeah, so you'll remember from Trump's first administration that it didn't start off well for U.S.-Pakistan relations. Early in his administration, he suspended most security aid to Pakistan, and he had some not nice things to say about Pakistan. The relationship did improve with the U.S. Later on, but I think that we should not expect all that much from U.S.-Pakistan relations. I think that the Trump administration will likely not prioritize the relationship with Pakistan. If one wants to be an optimist, you could say, well, there's no major crisis playing out with Pakistan now. There's no tensions, and maybe it's a good thing for for Pakistan not to be on President Trump's radar. But you look at how Trump is looking to put this administration together. He's picked some people to join his cabinet that are very strong proponents of friendship with India, and there's some very harsh critics of Pakistan in this administration. So, we'll see. I suspect that because he's a transactional leader, Trump will he'll want to support trade with Pakistan. The U.S. continues to be the top destination for Pakistani exports. I imagine as long as he thinks that is okay for U.S. economic interest, he'll want to continue that. We might see some pressure coming from the Trump administration on Pakistan to try to reduce its reliance on China. That may be a very tall order there, but I think that's another way through which the Trump administration might look at Pakistan through the lens of competition with China.
But if the Trump administration has to send that kind of message to Pakistan to reduce or downgrade its economic relationship with China,
right?
They need to have some kind of leverage over Pakistan. If you're not offering anything, how can you ask Pakistan to make any kind of adjustments with other neighbors?
Right, exactly. And this is the challenge for the U.S. I mean, the U.S. has had a policy for quite a few years called the Indo-Pacific policy, which is meant to counter China by essentially providing alternatives to the types of assistance and support that China provides, like infrastructure assistance. But the U.S. has not been able to match what China has been able to do. And certainly if you look at Pakistan, you have CPEC, which is something that the U.S. has never been able to approach. I mean, there are possible ways that the U.S. can go about this. There's an agency in Washington called the International Development Finance Corporation, the DFC.
Right.
It's essentially a tool of the Indo-Pacific policy, and it has sponsored infrastructure assistance in countries around South Asia. And it's interesting that you have had senior leaders from DFC visiting Pakistan over the last few years, exploring possible investments, and it's seen through the lens of U.S.-China competition. The idea is to bring DFC projects to the countries of the region to push back against China. Again, China is already so present in Pakistan, it might be hard to do that, but I do think the Trump administration might look favorably upon the idea of trying to scale up DFC projects in Pakistan, where the portfolio is quite modest at this point.
And if Pakistan is off the table, that means a reduced role of the United States in South Asia, given the relationship, as I suspect, between India and the United States is not as cozy as before after whatever happened in the Indo-Pacific.
I think that, yes, I mean, since U.S. forces left Afghanistan, the U.S. posture, so to speak, in Pakistan and Afghanistan has become very different, much more modest, not nearly as deep of a footprint as there had been some years ago. But, I would say this, Trump and his administration will be very concerned about terrorism, about Islamic State Khorasan specifically, which of course is based in Afghanistan. Um, you could be sure that Pakistani officials will try to leverage that U.S. concern about this terrorism threat emanating from Afghanistan next door to Pakistan and try to make a pitch to the administration, the Trump administration, about renewing counterterrorism cooperation. I think this is something that Pakistan tried to do with the Biden administration. The Biden administration, so far as I understand, was not that interested. I don't think the Trump administration will be either, just because you have so many harsh critics of Pakistan within the Trump administration. But I think that Trump likes to say that he defeated ISIS, right? And so he'll also want to be seen as the one that's able to curb this resurgence of ISIS, which mainly has played out through this growing threat posed by Islamic State Khorasan. So that might mean that there could be some modest scope for counterterrorism cooperation between the U.S. and Pakistan, realistically through several rounds of dialogue in this ongoing counterterrorism dialogue that you saw in the previous Biden administration as well.
We heard Adam saying at the breakfast event this morning that Pakistan needs to take care of itself. There's not going to be any substantial assistance from the United States in terms of collaboration, but so is that part of the large-scale global American policy now? We saw in the last couple of days, Trump, after taking his office, withdrew from the Paris Agreement, announced the reduction of the U.S. role in NATO in terms of monetary assistance.
Right.
So that kind of situation, so U.S. is becoming more inward-looking and leaving all other countries that were relying on the U.S. military or financial assistance on their own. Is a part of that policy.
I think with Pakistan, you could look at the U.S. approach there through two lenses, neither of which benefit U.S.-Pakistan partnership. One is the broader Trump posture when it comes to the world. Indeed, as you say, I mean, he doesn't want the U.S. to be as engaged and not spending as much money in particular and supplying as many weapons to the world, including allies and partners, as has been the case when Trump has not been president. But I think with Pakistan, there's the added issue of the fact that you just have many people in this administration that don't like the idea of partnership with Pakistan. We remember when Trump was president previously that he repeatedly brought attention to this notion that Pakistan was supporting terrorists that target and kill Americans. And that's not inaccurate if you look at the past record. But I think that when you look at that today, it suggests to me that Pakistan will have some work to do. And I mentioned this in my own comments yesterday, that it's going to be difficult, quite frankly, for Pakistan's government to get the attention of the Trump administration, just because it's not going to see a natural pathway for engagement or partnership with Pakistan, particularly because it doesn't want to be engaging with the world as much anyway. So, if Trump doesn't want to engage with allies and partners as much as he had, the idea of engaging with Pakistan, which is theoretically an ally but not a close ally, I think that it would be even more of a hard sell to bring that relationship forward.
Right, but when we talk about Pakistan's engagement with any terrorist group in Afghanistan, from Pakistan's perspective, if you see the way Pakistan's relationship with the United States has been in the past, the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan in the 90s and thereafter, after the recent withdrawal. So Pakistan always had this issue of leaving an unstable Afghanistan behind.
Right.
And Pakistan definitely wanted to maintain its foothold and some good relationship with some faction in Afghanistan to be able to maintain some kind of stability there. and that has been looked at Pakistan's playing double games with the United States. So there's a whole difference in the perspectives on both sides.
Yeah, you're right. And this is one reason why the U.S. Pakistan relationship faces these fundamental constraints. Not to take away from the success stories in U.S. Pakistan relations, but you have two countries, two governments, two publics that look at the Afghanistan story through such a different lens, right? I mean, the U.S. and Americans look at Pakistan as a country that was, taking policies that imperiled U.S. interests and U.S. lives in Afghanistan, whereas, of course, Pakistan looks at the U.S. as an invader, a country that invaded Afghanistan and then left. Of course, this happened on several occasions. And it essentially left its mess behind, and Pakistan had to pay the consequences of that for geographic reasons as Afghanistan's neighbor. And it's hard to reconcile those two different positions, quite frankly. And the Trump administration will very much double down on that categorical, fundamental U.S. Position. And I think Pakistan is especially disadvantaged now because as you know, its relations with the Taliban are in bad shape. It's dealing with this terrorism problem based in Afghanistan. And meanwhile, India has been able to very slowly but successfully scale up its own engagement with the Taliban to the point that now there's a friendly relationship between the Taliban and India. And the U.S. is not going to sympathize with Pakistan on any of those issues.
Yeah, there's a whole amount of irony in it, what the Indians are doing. But Pakistan sees United States as an invader in Afghanistan. Afghanis see Pakistan as the facilitators of the Americans for invading Afghanistan. So we don't know which side is better suited to our narrative. Like if the United States is thinking about Pakistan as we look at them as the invaders,
right,
and the Afghanis look at us as the facilitators of that invasion. Which narrative do you think holds more value for Pakistan?
Yeah, no, it's tough to make sense of that all, and I think that one can talk about Pakistan, how it benefits from its geography, and we talked about this here at Davos. The fact that Pakistan serves as a pathway to the Middle East, to Central Asia, to East Asia. So its geography is an asset, but it's also arguably a liability just because you have these wars that have played out across Pakistan's borders, and you have so many volatilities and instabilities playing out, certainly to the west in Afghanistan and further afield in Iran, and so on. So Pakistan is really in a tough place, and the fact of the matter is that many countries over the years have sought to invade Afghanistan. Most of them have been quite unsuccessful, and Pakistan has, I think, faced the spillover effects of all that. But indeed, it is true, and it is fact that Pakistan has backed the Taliban. It's backed parties to the conflict in Afghanistan. And I think I would argue, quite frankly, that after the U.S. left Afghanistan, after the Taliban came back, I think that many in Pakistan, including those in government and including those in the military, overstated the ability of Pakistan to convince the Taliban to curb the TTP. I think that it's maybe not recognizing that the Taliban at the end of the day would not need to rely on Pakistan anymore with the war over, and that would mean that Pakistan's leverage over the Taliban had basically disappeared. But, at the end of the day, what I think matters the most here is the people, right? I mean, we know that Pakistanis are getting hit hard by this resurgence in TTP terrorism. The Afghan people are suffering from humanitarian and economic stress. I think in an ideal world, what narrative is the right one to take? I don't know, but what you would like to see is the Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship improving so that Pakistan can be in a position where it doesn't need to worry about these terrorism threats from Afghanistan, and where perhaps Pakistan can do something to help the Afghan people through its own support. India has stepped in to play that role, a role that it has long played in Afghanistan as a provider of humanitarian and development aid. But Pakistan is, I think, not very popular. It typically is not very popular among the Afghan public, but I don't think that's changed, and I wish it were different.
You have been deeply engaged with Pakistanis here at Davos last couple of days, and you have a whole range of people you have come across. And through their conversations and your interaction with Pakistan at large, or do you think is the main challenge that Pakistan is facing at the moment?
Yeah, I think that Pakistan is experiencing one of its most difficult moments in quite a few decades, in the sense that it's dealing with several serious crises playing out at the same time. Certainly, an especially bitter political confrontation between the leadership and the opposition, economic stress, which continues to be very severe, and this resurgence in terrorism. And if you combine that with the rising effects of climate change, and what I find most concerning is that the level of cynicism and skepticism coming from the public toward their leaders, toward their institutions, particularly from youth, it's at a level that I don't remember hearing or sensing in my nearly 20 years of focusing on Pakistan. This, I think, is what stands out. I don't know if you want to call it a social contract having been broken or what, but this is the fact that so many members of the public society seem so upset with the state of governance, the state of the authorities, and not necessarily just those that are leading the country now, but the broader elites, the broader political elites in Pakistan. All of these things have to be addressed, but I think it's that crisis of confidence. That's what I think stands out. That's what stands out the most. And so we have to hope that could turn things around, but you can't do that at the flick of a switch. And given the everyday threats posed by inflation and terrorism and all, Pakistan doesn't have the luxury to just step back and think about how to address these rising levels of mistrust from the public.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for watching. Take care of yourself.